Hi guys, so today we are going to be talking about my top 5 favorite cool toned neutral palettes. So when you think of cool toned colors, you think of purples and beiges and grays and grays and blacks and taupes, and that kind of encompasses the more neutral cool toned spectrum. Some rosy shades may be thrown in there as well. I am choosing to focus this video on cool tone palettes separate from bright colors that are cool toned. So obviously bright blues are cool toned, navies and greens, all of those are cool toned colors as well. And if you'd like me to do any sort of like favorite greens or favorite blues, I'd be happy to do that for you. But for today's purposes, I wanted to share with you my top 5 neutral cool toned palettes. I feel like there has been a rash of warm tone palettes for the last year and a half, maybe longer. And for me, for as much as I love some warm tone palettes, I feel like cool tones have been neglected as part of the launches from different brands. And so whenever I find a cool tone palette that I think is really well done, I get kind of excited because I like cool toned eyeshadows. I think they are really natural and flattering with my skin tone. I think they work really well for work occasions, and I also feel like a more neutral, cool toned eye look is one that I always reach for when I am going for a bold lip. So if I want to wear a bright red or a bright pink, I tend to think about putting cool tones on my eyes. I don't know if that's everyone, but that's just kind of how I think about it. So we're going to go through these today. These are not in any particular order. I will definitely talk about the pros and the cons of any of these palettes, but let's go ahead and get started. First up, let's actually talk about what is on my eyes today, and that is the Colorpop Fame palette. So this came out to slightly mixed reviews, and I do understand some of the pros and the cons that I read about this palette. But I do have to say, from a quality perspective, this palette is glorious. There is absolutely nothing wrong with, I don't think, any of the shades in this palette. I think they actually all perform. And I've used all of these shades many times over. Today, let me just show you real quickly what I have on, and then we'll get into some swatches. But today in particular, I blended out the shade Delirium here at the top, sort of above my crease. And then I used this shade Stardom sort of through my crease and in my outer corner to kind of use it lightly to kind of blend out things, and then a little more intense to add some depth. On my lids are 2 shades, so I have the shade The Most over here, sort of in my inner part of my lid, and then towards the center I put the shade Dazzle just to give a little bit of dimension and depth moving out. And then in my outer corner, because I wanted just to deepen it slightly, I actually mixed. This is actually a very dark murky plum, so I mixed these two together, tapped up my brush, and very lightly went in to kind of just deepen up the outer corner a smidge. In my inner corner, I put this shade here to kind of brighten things up. And then I used the shade underneath my eyelashes, and then this dark shade as kind of a liner, sort of a light smoky liner right at my lash line. This is a beautiful palette, but I will admit that when I first saw this, I thought they missed something kind of obvious, and that was a taupe. So I like a good taupey transition shade, and that was one that I felt like was missing in here. And to be honest, I still kind of do. I also looked at this and thought, oh my gosh, all of these shimmers look exactly alike. So I did swatch this palette a little differently. I actually swatched all of the mattes first. So here you can see you've got a couple of light shades. You've got 3 sort of mid-toned shades that actually go a little neutral in many cases, and then a little cooler with a more plummy undertone. And then you've got a nice soft gray and a really deep dark purpley plum shade down here. In fact, it's so dark you would almost think it was black, but really it's like the darkest plum you've ever seen. I do feel like although Razzle and Stardom here are close, and this is where I feel like they probably could have dropped one and pulled in a taupe instead, I do like both of these shades. I've used both of these shades, so they actually do ombre out well together too. So if you use Razzle and then use Stardust, it does kind of blend out effectively. So in general, I do like the mattes in here, but I do feel like they missed that taupe shade. As it relates to the shimmer shades here, you definitely have a lot of lid shades that are different undertones that are going to kind of function in the same way. They're going to be that light wash of color, kind of like I've worn on my eyes today. They're going to give you different undertones of that light, bright wash of color, but they all have a distinct place. So I do feel like if you're somebody who likes a lighter eyelid, you will probably enjoy this palette because you get a lot of diverse pinks or golds or pink gold shifts to these shades. You do have a really pretty taupe shade in Privy, and then you've got two sort of murky plum slash mauve colors at the bottom if you would like to do a deeper, more smoky, cool tone look. So all in all, I really do enjoy this palette. There's not a dud shade in this palette. I frequently find with most palettes, I'm like, that shade could be improved, or gosh, I really wish they hadn't put all that sparkle in a matte shade, etc. And with this one, I'm just pleasantly surprised every time I use this. I don't have to use my finger to get great payoff and pigmentation with the shimmers. The mattes blend, they last on the eyes, so I do really enjoy this particular palette quite a bit. But I do feel like this has gotten a decent amount of attention because Colourpop launched it. So now let's talk about a palette that you may not even have heard of. So let's talk about the Winky Kitten Cashmere palette. First of all, it's adorable packaging. It's got these like purple background and flowers and kittens on the front. It is a little cutesy, but the inside colors are really cool. Like, I spotted this at my local Nordstrom actually, and I thought it was a really affordable price for something you're gonna find at Nordstrom. Big pan size, 9 pans, and I liked the fact that it was giving me a lot of different shades of matte. So you've got several shades that for me work really well as transition shades. You have a true gray, you have something that's more of a neutral color, and then you have this really pretty rosy slash pinky color. And then to deepen out your look, you have a really dark plum and you have a nice neutral chocolate brown. So I do feel like this palette can go both neutral and cool depending on how you pull in some of these pinks and purples and grays, because I do find that if I use this shade at the top and the shade at the bottom and then use this shade in particular, which is a little bit bronzy, I have a really beautiful neutral look that's not too warm or too cool. But I also feel I can make a really pretty purpley pink look out of this. This white shade actually is a duochrome pink shift to it, so that's a lot of fun. It looks good on its own, but it also looks beautiful paired over top of any of these mattes. And then I really do like this cool tone bronze here. A cool tone bronze eye is one of my favorite looks in the summertime. So this is a palette I wanted to bring up because I think it gives you lots of diversity from a matte perspective. You can build a lot of really beautiful, interesting looks, and it's not a color combo that I see very frequently out there. And I think the quality of the shadows are also very beautiful. Easy to blend out, not super dusty, very good beginner type shadows as well, not ones that I ever worry about being too pigmented in the case of like you put it on, you're like, oh shoot, how in the world am I going to blend this out? This is more of a buildable shadow that isn't patchy as you build it up. So this is the Winky Cashmere Kitten palette, and I think it's a really great cool tone palette. So now let's turn our sights to a drugstore palette, and this is one that I have used for years, and it is from Milani. So this is their Everyday Eyes Must Have Naturals palette. So I do love the fact that this is a true taupey palette. You have a light taupe, you have a mid-tone taupe, and then you have a black, so you can build all kinds of depth from a shadow perspective. The middle shade here is a gorgeous taupey shimmer shade, beautiful all over the lid. Where this palette may fall a little short for me is the fact that they have two lid shades that are very, very light and very, very similar to one another. So the first shade here actually has a gold undertone to it, and then the second shade has a pink undertone. I don't have a problem with either one of those shades. They perform beautifully, they're nice quality, but I do look at them and I think, in a palette this tiny, I kind of feel like they're a little wasted. I personally would have probably dropped the more gold shade because I don't think it works as well with the cool tone shadows, and I would have just kept this pinky shade up here in the corner. It's fine, but I do think that the quality of all 6 of these shadows is phenomenal, and I would absolutely recommend it. I have taken this traveling for work more times than I can count because I do feel like I can get very neutral, beautiful matte looks, very comfortable, easy work appropriate looks for eyeshadows, and I think it is a really stellar palette at the drugstore. Okay, so this is my most recent discovery, and it's a little Smashbox palette. If you've been following my channel for a while, you've maybe heard me talk about this. I picked up this little Smashbox Cover Shot palette. This is the shade Punked. This is a new color scheme for them. I have not cared for the Cover Shot palettes. I tried and swatched a couple when they first came out, and I thought the formula was a little, honestly, it was a little lackluster in my opinion. This formula is completely different from an ingredients perspective, from a performance perspective, and it's absolutely stunning. If you like cool tone looks that are both taupe or potentially purple, this is where I would steer you. So we've talked about one that has just taupes. We've talked about one that has some roses and a little bit of plum to it. And we've talked about one that has some neutrals and some cool tones in the form of the Colorpop one. This is a true cool toned palette. It has two lovely transition shades. It has a very nice matte cream shade. You've got a darker sort of purpley gray color here, and then you've got a stunning matte black. And then where this palette really shines is with its lid shades. So you've got a large all over lid shade that is really bright and vivid and super pearly. Then you've got the most perfect taupe shade for all over the lid, and then a beautiful purple. So this palette, because you've got a purple transition and a purple all over lid, and then a more purpley gray, can look very purple very quickly. Or you can grab the more neutral transition, pull in a little bit of this shade or a little bit of the black mixed together with that transition, and you've got something that's more taupey and very, very natural all over the lid. So I have loved the color combos that came up with this. So I love this palette. I think it's beautiful, and I love how compact it is, and I think it's a pretty good value for Smashbox too. The last palette that I wanted to recommend is one from a brand that many of you guys may not have even heard of. It's from a brand called Studio Makeup on the Go. Now, I got this in my BoxyCharm, but they are a live brand out there on the interwebs now, so you can order this palette very easily. This is their on the go eyeshadow palette, and this is in the shade Cool Down. And this one leans a little bit more mauve. So whereas the past palette was cool and leaning a little more purple, this is cool and leans a little bit more mauve burgundy, which I think is absolutely beautiful. It has a lovely mauve shimmer shade here. It has a stunning sort of deeper taupey shade if you want something that's more of an everyday smoky eye. It has a great taupe transition shade, one of my favorites. And then you've got a all over sort of cream lid shade or under the brow shade. You have two lighter lid shades, but unlike the Milani palette where I felt like they were super close and the one went gold, there's one shade that's very pearl and it's beautiful all over the lid. It's great inner corner highlight or under the brow. It's a lovely satin texture. And then you've got one that goes a little bit more rosy and actually pairs really well with the mauve shade that is right beneath it. Now, this shade here is absolutely stunning. Now, this is a shade that has a little bit of grittiness because it has some micro shimmer in it, so I would use this one over a tacky base. I do find it works if I don't set my eyeshadow primer. I can just put this over the top and it's fine, but the intensity you get from that shade is absolutely stunning, and it's got this insane silver reflect running throughout it. So the shimmers in this palette are just absolutely stellar, and that's part of the reason I enjoy it so much. But then you've got just the perfect mix of matte shades that they've included in here so that it is a very balanced and well thought out palette. I absolutely love this. I recently had this in my everyday makeup drawer and I just fell even more deeply in love with it after using it, I don't even know, 5, 6, 7 times this last month. So this is a palette that if you like taupes and mauves a little bit better than taupes and purples, I will point you in this direction, and I don't think you'll be disappointed with any of the shades in this palette. All right guys, so that wraps us up for today's video. Those are my top 5 neutral, everyday, cool toned palettes. Let us know down in the comments below if you have a cool toned palette that you would like to recommend to the group. I feel like they're a little bit of this elusive unicorn in the makeup space right now. I feel like everything has been either very neutral or very, very warm for a while now. I do hope that cool tone palettes are making a comeback. I know I've seen in a number of other videos from other YouTubers and even out on brands' websites saying, guys, give us more cool tones. We're looking for that. So I do feel like there's a host of us out here who are coveting and craving these more cool toned colors. So if you're like me, definitely I'm curious about other palettes that are out there. What are your favorites, high-end or drugstore? Share us down in the comments below so we can find these elusive hidden jewel eyeshadow palettes. I hope you guys are having an amazing day. Talk to you soon. Bye.